Hello and welcome to the Super Casuals. My name is Auronado, and today we return to my series comparing the fundamentals of World of Warcraft then and now. The next topic in my series will cover the world of World of Warcraft. I will break the world topic into 4 parts: questing, scale, danger, and dungeons and raids. Today's video is on questing. Questing is truly a fundamental concept of the RPG genre. Somebody needs help, and it's up to you, and every other Tom, Dick, and Harry who goes to the zone, to provide it. Whether it be something as simple as fetching an old woman a bucket of water, or as dangerous as retrieving the head of a powerful dragon, your character will be tasked with a huge variety of quests on their journey throughout the world. I do not include questing in the leveling category because questing doesn't stop just because you hit max level. I put it in the world category because questing in the World of Warcraft as a fundamental system sends you from one corner of Azeroth to the next. Unlike the leveling category that came before, many of the questing changes that have come over time have been positive for the game. That said, while there have been huge improvements to questing over the years, not every change has been healthy for the game. Let's start with Classic. The questing experience in Classic was about as bare bones as you can get. For example, there is only one quest in the entire game with a voiceover, which is the late Ezra Chatterton voicing Ahab Wheathoof, a Tauren farmer looking for his missing dog in the zone Mulgore. Ezra sadly passed away in 2008 at the age of 12. Because there was no voice acting, whether it be the text in your quest journal or an NPC's dialogue, you had to read it all. There were 0 systems in place to help guide you. All you had was your journal and your world map. Quests could be incredibly vague at times. They weren't always clear on where you needed to go, which specific type of monster you had to slay, what an item you needed to pick up looked like, and so on. Players would either enjoy having to solve the problem, get frustrated that they couldn't figure it out immediately, or go around the problem via questing mods or websites. Generally, all quests at the time could be put into 3 categories: kill quests, fetch quests, and breadcrumb quests. Kill quests send you to kill however many of whatever type of monster. Fetch quests require you to bring back however many of an item which could be found on dead monsters or on the ground, purchased from vendors, or sometimes crafted. Breadcrumb quests told you to talk to another NPC somewhere else. The quests themselves were often in bizarre locations. This was doubly true of dungeon quests, which were often located in multiple separate locations, rarely anywhere near the dungeons themselves. Quests also had a tendency to require you to travel all over the world and back, sometimes multiple times. A big issue at the time was that it often felt like there just wasn't enough quests in an area. It was common to bounce back and forth between 2 or more zones, coming back to a zone to get more quests after gaining a level or 2, then returning elsewhere for the same reason. There were also far more group quests than at any other time. The zones often had large areas filled with elite monsters that you needed a group to deal with, and the quests attached to them often had much better goodies, a powerful incentive to get people to work together, and it worked very well. Overall, questing in Classic was honestly a bit of a mess, but there was a certain charm to it all. Being forced to read everything helped players learn the lore of the zones and kept people immersed in the world. when they weren't stuck on half-hour flight paths to go from one quest to the next. Next came the Burning Crusade. TBC left the classic zones largely unchanged at first. Over time, there were some new flight paths added, elite mobs in the classic zones were no longer elite, and Dustwallow Marsh received a new neutral questing hub in the new Goblin outpost, Mudsprocket. TBC was the first expansion for the World of Warcraft, and Blizzard totally screwed up at expansion launch. Almost the entire player base went through the same portal to the same zone, and everybody had to quest at the same time in the same part of the same world map. It was a complete disaster. There were far too many players competing for limited numbers of monsters and quest items, and there were frequent server problems due to the tremendous strain. It sorted itself out over a few days, but it was a valuable lesson learned. TBC also introduced the first rudimentary vehicle quests. It also later introduced daily quests, allowing players to increase some of their reputations without having to kill hundreds of monsters. As of patch 2.3, a sparkle effect was added to interactable objects on the ground, making it much easier to see quest objects. It cannot be stressed enough how big of a change that was for the vast majority of the player base. Next came Wrath of the Lich King. Wrath vastly improved the user interface for vehicle quests. It also started leaning very hard on hub-style questing areas, which kept players localized near quest givers, removing much of the time spent running around. Wrath also learned from the TBC mistake, splitting players up between two separate zones. And the Alliance and Horde quests were not right next to each other either. So many of the problems that started with TBC simply did not happen with Lich King. Cataclysm remade all of the classic zones and streamlined the entire leveling process. The zones were stuffed full of flight paths, graveyards, and were almost exclusively questing hubs. There was very little variation in questing style, everything was streamlined, and most zones were intended for exactly 5 or exactly 10 levels, depending on size. In addition, the user interface now allowed you to see the areas on the map where you were expected to do your quests. Mists of Pandaria did not do much with questing, but they did include an instanced farm for the players to build up. Kinda, sort of like player housing. It mostly ended up being used for cooking materials. Reactions to this questing idea were mixed, to put it lightly. Cataclysm also introduced the ability to talk to quest givers from a distance, allowing you to do chains of quests without having to go all the way back to the quest giver and then return to the same area multiple times. Warlords of Draenor introduced area quests. These, simply, are quests that trigger when the character moves into a region of the map and are then tasked with whatever objectives the quest provides. Warlords also introduced the mission table, which can be best described as a Facebook game inside of Warcraft that everybody was stuck doing because the rewards were too good to ignore. That topic is a horse that has been beaten to death, resurrected, beaten to death, resurrected, then beaten to death again, so I'll spare you that rant. Legion introduced world quests. World quests became available at max level, and are quests that can be seen on your world map that are active for a limited amount of time and were largely intended to replace daily quests. Battle for Azeroth did not implement any new questing systems that I'm aware of. With each expansion, leveling up through the areas in older content was made easier across the board. Player characters required less experience to level. Heirloom gear was later introduced to give extra experience. Classes were substantially more powerful than they were at the time. World elites were often no longer elites. and the user interface started telling you what to do instead of you having to figure it out. There has been a shift in games over the past decade or so. Developers have been designing their games to tell players exactly what to do, where to go, when to go there, why to go there, and how to do it when you are there. Instead of challenging the players to figure things out, everything is spoon-fed to them. Now, I am not suggesting that this type of game should not exist. Of course, there's a market out there for people who just want to have fun, not think too hard, or maybe they just like having a guiding hand to keep them moving through the game. That is not what World of Warcraft was about. WoW changed over time from a game that was absolutely brutal on players, right from the starting areas, and was a challenge from beginning to end. Part of that was because of limited UI. Part of it was nasty number tuning. The Defias Mage says Fireball, hi! Part of it was class weaknesses, and plenty of other factors. Wrath of the Lich King was the point when things started to get much too easy. Though this was largely a result of how much stronger classes were getting, while the world itself did not become more dangerous to balance it out. Cataclysm is the point when easy turned into treadmill. Now don't get me wrong, many of the questing changes have been positive. Questing hubs helps reduce the endless running around. Extra flight paths does much the same. Extra graveyards make death less of a time sink. Removing the elite status from mobs allows solo players to complete quests when there are fewer people going through the older content. These sorts of changes help make questing more efficient. Where I start taking issue is when the game starts telling you how to do everything. From Cataclysm onwards, the thrill of exploration was gone. You knew exactly where to go, exactly what to do, and you didn't even need to read quests at all because every last bit of relevant information was shoved in your face. People started to hit accept on quest givers without even reading a single word of it, and then complained that the zones were boring. Well, duh! They no longer have a story because you're just going rush, rush, rush to the end. And that's what happens when players have a helping hand that starts to carry them. Stay tuned for the next episode where I tackle the next world topic, scale. Until then, I thank you for watching the Super Casuals. My name is Auronado. Remember, keep it casual. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more.